Coming up today on the Nick Craig Show, confidence within the United States judicial system continues to plummet as the court wastes its time on a bunch of nonsensical, trivial matters. We'll have the most recent example of that coming up. And a good Friday morning to you. Welcome into the Nick Craig Show, streaming live this morning on YouTube, Rumble, X, and Facebook. Don't forget that you can take the show with you 24/7 on demand in your favorite podcast app by simply searching for the Nick Craig Show. You can also listen online by visiting the website nickcraig.com. Our program this morning brought to you by the Law Group here in Wilmington. Visit them online, lawgroupnc.com, or give them a call, 910-251-6088. This is not necessarily a new story as it relates to the judicial system in the United States. In years past, there have been a plethora of different surveys and studies from Gallup to other institutions that have looked at the United States judicial system, looked at people's opinions on said judicial system, and have consistently shown that the number is trending in a downward direction. And there's a litany of reasons for this. First, Democrats continue to use the court system to enact what they believe is good or proper legislation. You have heard the phrase before, sue till blue, and that is a very real thing that continues to happen, not only here in North Carolina, where we've covered it in extensive detail, but across the rest of the country. And you know, it should be something, and there's a lot of irony in this. You know, you've got the Democrat Party that is yelling and screaming about democracy this, democracy that, right? This is their big grift. Their big clarion call is democracy. And Donald Trump and the Republicans are destroying said democracy. Let's just peel a couple of layers back on that and lay this out. So Republicans have a banner year in 2024. Kamala Harris and the Democrat Party failed to put up a decent fight. Donald Trump wins the presidency. Republicans retain control of the United States Senate and the House. And so that gives the Republicans complete authority, or a complete majority, I should say, in Washington, D.C., right? And that was done by the voters, people across the United States of America, across a variety of different swing states and swing districts, elected Republicans. And so if you were a true believer in said democracy, which is actually a democratic republic, but we're not going to go down that rabbit hole today. If you were truly a fan of said democracy, you wouldn't then go on to spend the next 2 years using the courts to try and block the will of the people, right? And this is just another example, and I don't want to get too far off on this tangent because I want to get back to this judicial thing, but it's just important to lay out this very clear and obvious and evident fact. I mean, it's completely illogical. You support democracy, claimed as the left. You are afraid that our so-called democracy is being destroyed, yet you will not let the party that won the election fair and square, unless we're going back to 2016 and we're going to have Hillary Clinton and the Democrat Party claim that the election was rigged. If you believe in the freedom and the sanctity and the fairness of elections, then the democracy worked and the Republicans won and they should be allowed to govern. Now, that does not mean that they have uniform authority, uniform control. That's not what I'm indicating or saying in any way, shape, or form. But it just kind of builds this picture of some of the nonsense that goes on the left. And why it is relevant to this discussion is because of the way in which the left is now, quote unquote, governing. Because they lost the majority of the American populace. Because the American people rejected them largely on their ideas, they have decided that they will use the court system as their legislative branch. That because they could not win the popular vote or the electoral college and could not get their people into the White House, into a majority in the U.S. House or the U.S. Senate, they will use another branch of government to get their legislation, get their ideas, get their wills implemented. And for me as a conservative, and I think for many others on the political right, that has caused, and what you've seen, saw it in the first Trump administration, seen a lot of it here over the last little more than a year or so since Donald Trump was officially sworn in as the 47th president. It has caused me, and I think a lot of other people, to lose a great deal of confidence in the judicial system. And the most recent example I've got of this is a recent story and something that you've probably heard about, and it's been on my radar for now a couple of months. Just haven't had a chance to get into it. The fact that a federal judge is dealing with whether or not the president of the United States has the ability to build a ballroom on the White House. I mean, that is the level that the judiciary has gone down to. That is how in the mud the judiciary is. Things that are not even of relevant conversation. Building a ballroom, a physical building attached to the White House to host large state dinners. It doesn't matter what the reason is, but constructing a ballroom is now where the Democrats and the left-leaning judiciary has decided to take up their battle. And so when I'm, as a political observer, looking at what's going on, and I'm seeing headlines and stories about how judges are stepping in to stop the president of the United States from making additions or construction at the White House, how could it make me feel any other way but to lose a great deal of confidence in the judicial system? It's absurd. It's insane that is the conversation that is taking place. But it is right here, right now. This is what energy and time is being focused on. Does the president have the ability, like all of his predecessors in the past, to make modifications to the White House? In case you weren't aware of this, the White House has gone through quite a number of changes over the years. Case in point, the current White House press briefing room used to be a swimming pool. It is no longer a swimming pool. It is now the White House press briefing room in the basement. The White House, as time has gone on, as more and more needs have been identified, things have changed. Things have been adapted. Things have been added. Things have been subtracted. It's kind of a normal process in a building that has got a bunch of people in it consistently and is constantly evolving with the times. But for this issue, we've got Democrats, both politically and in the courts, deciding that it is a very important issue to deal with, blocking and trying to halt the construction of a ballroom. If that does not rub you the wrong way, if that does not come off to you as an absurd conversation to be having, well, then I guess you're probably deeply entrenched on the political left. So here's the deal. Just this week, a federal judge ordered on Thursday, April the 16th, that the construction of the White House ballroom needs to be limited to just underground work. So build a ballroom underground, aka the foundation. In a 10-page opinion, Judge Richard Leon of the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia wrote that, quote, below-ground construction for national security facilities and to protect the president and the White House may continue, while above construction of the planned ballroom must be stopped. This decision follows a preliminary injunction granted by the same judge back on March the 31st in favor of the National Trust for Historic Preservation in the United States, which sought to halt the project. Judge Leon's original order allowed for some limited exemptions for work that is, quote, strictly necessary to ensure the safety and security of the White House and its occupants. In his latest ruling, Judge Leon rejected the administration's interpretation of this exception, writing that officials had, quote, attempted to turn this exemption on its head by arguing that it permitted the entire project to move forward. He said he cannot possibly agree with that reasoning. In a Truth Social post, no question about it, President Donald Trump, involved in this story, criticized the judge, calling his ruling a, quote, mockery to the United States court system. And in this case, I believe that the President of the United States is absolutely correct. An absolute mockery when the court is spending its time arguing over whether the president can build a freaking ballroom at the White House. That is what we are talking about. That is the pressing issue that is in front of the U.S. judiciary. Absolute and total insanity. So as I just went through some of the details on this most recent order out of the district court system in Washington, D.C., once again halting the construction of a ballroom that the President of the United States is attempting to build at the White House, so when they have large state dinners, they don't have to put people in white pop-up tents. This is what the court is focused on. And so when I would argue, even as a middle-of-the-road person, unless you are suffering from Trump derangement syndrome, which I'll note there are plenty of people that are, but unless you're suffering from Trump derangement syndrome, I can't imagine you look at a story like this or see a headline like this and bat your eyes and say, really? This is what we're talking about? This is the conversation that we're having, everything that's going on in the world right now, and Democrats are using the judicial system to try and block the president from making a modification. I'll note a major one, but a modification to the White House. I mean, it's absurd. So you've got this group called the National Trust, a bunch of lefty lunatics in Washington, D.C., no surprise there, filed a motion for clarification on April 1st, citing public statements by the president that suggested a broader interpretation of the court's order that halted some of the construction. The administration, responded by filing an appeal and an emergency motion to block further restrictions. On April the 11th, an appeals court sent the case back to Judge Leon with the instructions to clarify how the injunction and its exceptions apply to safety and security concerns during the litigation. The court also extended a temporary pause on the injunction through April 17th. Judge Leon's initial order was that the ballroom construction must be paused until there is congressional authorization. He wrote that the National Trust is likely to succeed in the case on its merits, with the judge saying at the time, Trump may at any time go to Congress to obtain express authority to construct a ballroom and do so with private funds, which of course is an interesting part of the story that I haven't even bothered to bring up yet. You and I aren't paying for it. I'll get into that in a second. Indeed, Congress may even choose to appropriate funds for the ballroom, or at least decide that some other funding scheme is acceptable. Either way, Congress will thereby retain its authority over the nation's property and its oversight over government spending. Oh, yeah. Yeah, tell me about government spending and how Congress is going to make sure it keeps its oversight on government spending. If you gave Congress $1 and told them to keep close watch of said dollar and make sure that it is not spent, that money would be gone before your back was even turned. That's the argument here. Well, yeah, now we're real concerned, these left-wing judges, real concerned over government spending and making sure that Congress has its oversight over government spending. I mean, come on, give me a break. The White House announced the ballroom last July, saying that it would be 90,000 square feet with the ability to hold up to 650 people, which was later revised to 900 people. Important to note, the project is being funded entirely by private donors. The National Capital Planning Commission approved the project earlier this year, with critics such as the National Trust for Historic Preservation raising concerns about the scale and the impact of the proposed addition to the White House. So the National Capital Planning Commission approves the project, but a bunch of lefties in a historic commission, which is what this is, and you see these places all over the United States. They exist here in North Carolina and many of our downtown areas across the state. You've got these historic associations, these historic societies. It is an HOA on steroids for individuals that crave power, that need to have the authority over somebody else. So they get onto these boards and weaponize these entities like the National Trust for Historic Preservation to their political will. And so this is the debate. This is the discussion we're having. The reason I didn't bring up the funding part of it at the beginning is because I wanted to get to this point. Think about all of the federal time that is being spent on something like this. You've got the administration itself paying its employees with taxpayer dollars that is having to go back and forth on this tit-for-tat battle with the National Trust for Historic Preservation. So the administration is, of course, having to expense staff time fighting this ridiculous legal challenge. You've got the judge himself alongside all of his employees, all of the staff, the clerks, and everybody else associated with his court and the judicial system in the District of Columbia that are spending their time dealing with this back and forth. And then you've got the National Trust for Historic Preservation, a federal group that is doing this as well. So you and me as the taxpayer are paying for all three of the different parties in this case: the administration, the National Trust, and the court system that's actually dealing with it. That is a major problem to me. That is something that has caused me, and I think a lot of other individuals, to lose their trust or begin the process of losing trust, losing confidence within the judicial system, whether we're talking about the federal courts, the state court system, or even the United States Supreme Court. And so when you look at polling on this, you will see that that number is continually trending down. And while I have a concern with that, absolutely, I think you begin the process of eroding a society, eroding a country like the United States when you lose faith in its judicial system. But at the same time, a lot of this is self-inflicted. A lot of this is judges deciding that they want to put their finger on the scale. I had the ability to moderate a judicial panel just actually earlier this week, talking to and kind of going through this panel with a couple of different judges at different levels of the court system, district and superior court. And one of the questions from the audience, and it was a good one, was, why are we seeing such hyper politicization of the court system? And one of the judges, and Judge Frank Jones, responded really well to that, saying, if I wanted to write laws, I would have run for the General Assembly. I would have run to become a legislator. I would have run for Congress. I would have done something that is in the legislative branch where I can write laws. But as he made the point, I think very succinctly and very clearly to the crowd, I didn't choose that because I wasn't in the business of legislation. And that's not the business that I'm in on the courts. I am in the business of following the law and interpreting the law as written. That is my job, not to make things up, not to insert my personal opinion or my personal belief on something, to interpret the law as written. And we have seen, unfortunately, a mass exodus of that from a lot of individuals within the court system all over the map, all over the board. And it really goes all the way back to what I was mentioning just a couple of minutes ago. Democrats continue to lose elections. They are not in legislative power, so they have decided their quickest and most expedient way to regain power, to push their will down the throats of the people that have rejected them politically, is to weaponize the court system to do their bidding. And so with that playing out, and we've seen literally hundreds of examples of it over the last 5 or 10 years, with that playing out, it is no surprise to me, and it shouldn't be any major surprise to you, that the American people are continually losing trust in the judicial system when we are having a full-fledged argument within the federal court system over whether the president can build a ballroom attached to the White House. It's insane, but that's what's going on. So it should be no surprise to you. It is truly no surprise to me. And unfortunately, what this is going to lead to is people just ignoring the courts. And I would argue that that is one of the ways in which society begins to collapse. When you have 25% of people that have any confidence in the judicial system, our society fails, folks. There's no two ways about it. You can't have a society where 80% or 75 or 70% of people say, yeah, to hell with what the courts are saying. We don't trust or believe in them anyway. That's going to create a huge problem here across the United States. So As it stands right now, the ballroom is once again halted. Obviously, the best use of the court systems in Washington, D.C., a good use of time for the Trump administration to be arguing with a historic commission in Washington, D.C. over whether the president has the ability to make modifications and changes to the White House. Congratulations, Democrats. You've got a major win on your hands here. Hopefully that will swell you to political victory coming up here in later 2026. Maybe you can add this to one of your major campaign platforms, that we stop Trump from building a ballroom at the White House. I'm sure that will resonate very, very well with voters across the United States. So we'll see. I'm sure this decision will be appealed again. I don't know. Does this have to go to the United States Supreme Court? I mean, I have no freaking idea. So I'll keep an eye on the details, and as relevant, bring them to you right here on the Nick Craig Show. All right, we're going to grab a quick break, but before that, I want to thank Melissa Gott and the law group here in Wilmington, and remind you that if you're dealing with any legal issues, questions, concerns across southeastern North Carolina, make sure you put your trust in the law group. That's what I've done. Since 2003, their experienced attorneys have provided high-quality, affordable legal services across the eastern half of our state. Whether you're facing a divorce, navigating a real estate transaction, or maybe you're in a position where you need a strong defense, no matter the issue, the law group has your back. Their dedicated team ensures your questions are answered and issues are resolved as quickly as possible. Great news, ladies and gentlemen. The law group is not some big national law firm. Melissa Gott and her team, they live in Wilmington. They live in southeastern North Carolina, and they're just a phone call away at 910-251-6088, or you can visit them online at lawgroupnc.com. That's 910-251-6088, or online lawgroupnc.com. It's the law group. Experience and dedication you can rely on. We appreciate the law group and their continued support of the Nick Craig Show. All right, quick break, and we'll round out a Friday edition of the Nick Craig Show coming up as we stream live this morning, 7 a.m., YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, and available 24/7 wherever you get your podcasts. And a good Friday to you. Welcome back to the Nick Craig Show. Thanks for rounding out your week with us. A busy news week here across the nation and the globe. We were talking about the judicial system and how growing swaths of the American public are in fact losing their confidence in the system. And it's, really, I can't blame the people for losing confidence when you see the courts entrenched in ridiculous issues like building a ballroom attached to the White House so that the administration and administrations going forward can host events that hold more than I think the current max that the White House can hold in their smaller kind of dining rooms is like 250 people, which, is a lot, but you're talking about when you've got these, dignitaries traveling from across the globe, these major dinners taking place. 250 is not a lot. When you look at inviting people plus a spouse, you're talking about a relatively small group of people. So the administration says, hey, we're sick of putting up white tents on the lawn of the White House and hosting our dinners in these patio tents. So let's build a ballroom attached to the White House. And of course, Democrats, because they hate Trump, I guess, decide that that's a valiant effort for the courts to take up. And so that's the process right now. So as we speak about things that are frustrating us, well, how about Thom Tillis? Caught an interesting headline over at Politico yesterday that reads this. Tillis, referring to U.S. Senator Thom Tillis, holds the cards in Trump's Fed clash and won't fold. So Thom Tillis really making his mark in his final days within Washington, D.C. Donald Trump has a growing Thom Tillis problem, writes Politico. The administration's actions this week are doing nothing to solve it. As the president of the United States flirts with trying to fire Fed Reserve Chair Jerome Powell and dismisses Tillis as, quote, no longer a senator, the retiring North Carolina Republican shot back with his own message to the administration this week, saying, quote, I'm not dead yet. Saying, quote, I'm not very tauntable. That's part of growing up in a trailer park. You get kind of used to this stuff. What the hell is Thom Tillis doing? I mean, seriously. He already has absolutely no favor with the vast majority of Republicans across North Carolina. He decided to retire, I believe, in large part because he would not have won in a general election. He has upset and ticked off so many Republicans, so many conservatives across the state of North Carolina, people that plugged their nose and voted for him 6 years ago because, of course, the lesser of two evils, he was better than the Democrat. Republicans are finding themselves ever more frustrated with that, those options, those positions. I believe from a political standpoint, Tillis made the smart decision in deciding that he was not going to run for re-election. And so with that, now he is going to be the anti-Trump Republican, the champion of the never Trumpers in Washington, D.C. And so, meanwhile, we see our other U.S. Senator and Ted Budd, who is in Western North Carolina with Markwayne Mullin, trying to get more relief flowing to Western North Carolina. Budd has done a phenomenal job of pushing back against the administration and holding things up, saying, hey, I'm not approving this stuff until you get more money flowing out to the western half of North Carolina to incredible success, which is, I'll admit the situation is unfortunate, but that's what you'd hope one of your two U.S. senators would be doing. In a perfect world, both of your U.S. senators would be doing that. Thom Tillis is doing nothing about that. He's not with Ted Budd. We played the clips, was it last week here on the show, walked through the event that took place in Western North Carolina with members of Congress, Tim Moore, Chuck Edwards, as I mentioned, Senator Ted Budd, Markwayne Mullin, the new head of DHS, and by extension, over FEMA. Where's Thom Tillis? Nowhere to be found. He's continuing to have his hissy fit with the Trump administration in Washington, D.C. So the most recent example of this takes us to Tillis and his blocking of Trump's Fed chair nominee, Kevin Warsh, until the Justice Department drops its investigation into Jerome Powell. and the stallmate is leaving him in limbo with no clear off-ramp in sight, writes Politico. The Senate Banking Committee, where Tillis holds a deciding vote, is holding Warsh's nomination hearing next Tuesday, and Tillis is leaving the door open to using even more of his leverage, including his Senate Judiciary vote, in the event that the panel considers a successor to former Attorney General Pam Bondi. Some of Tillis's fellow Republicans privately acknowledged to Politico that they don't understand the White House's current strategy, which they believe risks antagonizing Tillis and empowering Powell. Now, let me make sure I lay this point out. I can understand for some Republicans in Washington, D.C. that don't truly understand the frustration that voters have with Tillis. I have no problem at all with the administration antagonizing Thom Tillis. We have seen very clearly over the last 12 years in Washington, D.C., that Tillis will do whatever he wants, which I will note is his right to do. If he feels and believes strongly about something, it is his right. While I don't agree with it a lot of the time, that is his right to play that out. And I'm not frustrated that he has those opinions. I don't like them. That's his right to do. But let's not sit here and pretend that if the White House wasn't quote unquote antagonizing Thom Tillis, that he'd be falling in line with this administration. It's just not true. We've seen from the earliest days of this second Trump administration that Thom Tillis has an axe to grind with the president. Whether the president comments on it or not, it's not changing. And so the president says, you know what, to hell with this. Tillis is going to be out here just being a huge thorn in my side. I'm just going to slap back at him. Tillis isn't going to back down on this, whether he's antagonized or not. And he can go through his growing up in a trailer park story all he wants. It's not going to change the situation. He has been a constant pain in the side of the Republican majority in Washington, D.C., regardless of whether Trump is quote unquote antagonizing him or not. And so you've got a growing chorus of Republicans that are now privately calling on the DOJ to end its investigation into whether Powell lied to Congress about cost overruns at the Fed's Washington headquarters. Powell, who denies wrongdoing, has said that the investigation is a pretext to target him for not lowering interest rates as aggressively as Trump wants. With Senator Mike Rounds, the Republican from South Dakota, saying, quote, Tillis has made it very clear he has a position on it, who sits next to Tillis on the Senate Banking Committee, noting this is easily resolvable. I don't think it's easily resolvable. Tillis wants to give Jerome Powell a free pass for lying to Congress, which, maybe you weren't aware of, is a crime. Maybe Thom Tillis isn't aware of this, but it is in fact a crime to under oath lie to Congress. And I believe that that's something that should be dealt with. I believe that when you put yourself in a position and lie to Congress, that you should be held accountable. And that is precisely what the investigation is doing, determining whether or not Powell lied. If he didn't, then the DOJ will conclude its investigation and say, yeah, I mean, maybe misconstrued the truth a little bit, but he didn't openly and actively lie to Congress. And then said investigation will be done and we'll move on. If he did lie to Congress, well, then he should have to pay a price. There should be consequences for that. Tillis has denied any personal bad blood between himself and the president. He did that on Wednesday, noting that they've spoken in recent days about other issues. But he didn't pull his punches when asked about Trump's threat to fire Powell or to visit that officials from the U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro's office made to the Federal Reserve headquarters last week, with Tillis saying, it's kind of like, guys, what are you doing? You're watching too many cop shows thinking that that's cute. Go up there and intimidating a witness. For goodness sake, that's so Bush League. They're upping the pressure, but there's nowhere to go. So now Tillis is accusing the administration of threatening witnesses. Again, you're doing an investigation, probably going to have to go and talk to some people. You're probably going to have to interview some individuals. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe Thom Tillis is way more intelligent than everybody else. As I understand it, that's typically how an investigation goes around. You ask around, you talk to people, you conduct interviews. Seems like a pretty normal process from what I am used to following. So back to this Politico article. Let me restart that completely. Back to this Politico article on Thom Tillis. This is not the first time that we have seen Tillis at odds with the administration, frustrated with President Donald Trump, being the lone deciding individual, stonewalling some of the Trump's picks and appointees within commissions, and that is going on right now, with Tillis suggesting that DOJ officials are only digging themselves into a deeper hole and advise them to, quote, take the shovels out of their hands. Trump has shown little interest in seeing the DOJ end its probe, which focuses on statement Powell made to the Senate Banking Committee during testimony last year, of which I'll note Thom Tillis sits on, with the president telling Fox Business Wednesday morning, whether it's incompetence, corruption, or both, I think you have to find out. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump is ratcheting up his conflict with Jerome Powell, saying that he would seek to oust the Fed chief if he stays on after his term as Fed chair, which ends early next month. A growing possibility as Walsh's confirmation remains stalled amid the Tillis stalemate. Any move to fire Powell would kick off a major legal clash, and the Supreme Court has already signaled opposition to the president exerting control over the Fed. Now, this is interesting, right? Because the president has not fired Powell. His term ends next month. The president is obviously getting good advice that firing him is not going to be a beneficial solution. So he's waiting for his term to end, which is the right thing to do, and is getting ready to appoint somebody else, right? His term is ending. Now, he could be reappointed, sure, but because his term is up, I would argue that the president has the ability to appoint somebody else, right? We've been hearing this for over a year now. Trump is going to fire Jerome Powell. Trump is going to fire Jerome Powell. He's not, and he hasn't, and he's not going to. He's waiting for his term to end because, as going all the way back to what we were talking about earlier on the show, we know that the court system would, of course, jump in and slap down the Trump administration. So the president is following the process, waiting for his term to expire, and will appoint somebody else. But even for Thom Tillis, that's not good enough. No surprise there at all. Any move to fire Powell, as I mentioned, would kick off that court battle, with Trump saying, I'll have to fire him, okay, if he's not leaving on time, which would be, of course, at the end of his term. Tillis is warning that moving to fire Powell would ultimately backfire, with the U.S. Senator from North Carolina saying, quote, he won't have the right to terminate him, and all we've done is wasted time that we could have otherwise resulted in a new chair and a new Fed board under this president. We have wasted time. There's no we there, Tom. It's you. You've been the one not holding up the nomination because you disagree with Walsh and his potential appointment, but because you don't like the fact that the administration is investigating Jerome Powell for potentially lying to your committee. Even as the administration digs in over the Powell probe, Senate Republicans are making clear that they don't expect Tillis to fold, which he's not going to. So whether the Trump administration, quote unquote, antagonizes him or not, nothing is going to change. Senate Majority Leader John Thune said on Wednesday that he believed that the administration should wrap up its investigation. He said that Republicans are excited about Walsh, but he's essentially stuck until they resolve the standoff with Tillis over Powell. Here we go. The mighty John Thune, the man who's been sitting on the SAVE Act now for 2 months? The guy who refuses to force Congress to do its job? The guy who is consistently bowing down to the political left as the majority leader? Frankly, I don't care what John Thune has to say at this point. He has been such a disappointment. I mean, I can't even begin to wrap my head around it. I had objections with him when he was first announced as the Senate Majority Leader. I, however, was optimistic. I was hopeful that he would work with this administration, that he would continue to push forward the America First, the MAGA, the conservative, the Republican agenda that we do have the majority for in Washington, D.C. But we've seen that he's unwilling to do it. He refuses to bring the SAVE Act to the Senate floor for a vote. He is continually capitulating to the Democrat Party, continually bending over backwards to try and appease those on the political left for nothing, for no point. The Democrats are never going to side with us. This is something that I tell people all the time in both private and more private, but in public settings as well. If you believe, and I mean this as strong as I possibly can, you are never going to win over and be in the good graces of Democrats as a Republican. It's never going to happen. Don't for 1 second think that if Republicans don't nuke the filibuster here and vote on the SAVE Act, then that means that the Senate Democrats won't do it when they gain a majority. Wrong. They absolutely will, because they understand what's at stake. They understand the importance of getting their agenda passed through and will go to whatever means possible. So you're going to have to excuse me if I read these quotes here from Senate Majority Leader John Thune, published over at Politico, and just roll my eyes. John Thune is not a strong character. John Thune is not a good Senate Majority Leader. He has been an abject failure in my eyes, and I think the vast majority of MAGA Republicans that got Donald Trump in the White House and secured majorities in the United States Senate and the United States House. Wrapping up this article over at Politico, it's not only the committee where Tillis has leverage. Over on Judiciary, he has warned that he will block any attorney general nominee who has dismissed the events of January the 6th, 2021. When Politico writes, a mob of Trump supporters at the Capitol violently interrupted the formal counting of the Electoral College results. And he's not completely ruling out making the Fed probe a litmus test for an AG nominee if it continues. With Tillis saying, if we keep letting this go on, I'll have to consider other options for really amplifying my concerns. I don't see myself trying it right now. Here is my advice to President Donald Trump. Do not bend and cave for Thom Tillis. Don't do it. Don't give him the satisfaction in his last 6 or 7 months in office that he wields any power or any control. I am so sick of listening and hearing from Thom Tillis. This is a guy that knew that he could not win re-election. So, of course, he put, I got to spend time with my family, blah, 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 blah. He's completely abandoned the North Carolina voter who elected him twice, many of whom did not really want to vote for him the second time, but said, you know what? We're going to give this guy another chance. We understand that things aren't always as they seem. We're going to give this guy another shot. And here we are once again, where Thom Tillis, for seemingly no reason, is deciding that he is going to continue to stonewall this administration, that he is going to continue to block the work that Donald Trump should be doing. Donald Trump won. The Republicans won. Why are we having this discussion? Why are we having this debate? Approve his nominee. What are you doing, Tom? I mean, it's just, I would like to say that it's insane to think or crazy to read, but it's not. I mean, this is, when this is all said and done, this is going to be Thom Tillis's legacy. Really, it is. And it should be much better, right? Because he, and I'm not sure how many people even know this, especially if you're new to the state, he was instrumental in Republicans getting majorities here in North Carolina and fundamentally changing the path that North Carolina was on, which of course was 100 years of Democrat tax and spend policies that left the state bankrupt and heavily leveraged in debt to the federal government. Thom Tillis was an integral part in changing that and flipping around the trajectory and the path for North Carolina. That should be his legacy. We should be applauding him for the work that he's done. But he has spent the last 12 years in Washington, D.C., being a constant pain in the side of Republicans and bowing over and giving Democrats whatever they want. And so he's completely tarnished his legacy, and I cannot wait until later this year when Thom Tillis is gone. And it really doesn't matter who wins the Senate race. Thom Tillis will be gone. That'll be great news for conservatives and Republicans across the state of North Carolina. Now, obviously, I want Michael Whatley to win, but I'm saying regardless of whether it's Cooper or Whatley, hopefully it's Whatley, and that's who I'll be pushing for. That's who we'll be encouraging you to get out there and vote for. But just to not have to deal with Thom Tillis' bullshit anymore will be phenomenal. to not have to constantly watch interviews on CNN with Jake Tapper where Thom Tillis is running over there to get friendly media coverage. I'm just so sick of listening to it. His game, this shit he's been pulling over the last 5 or 6 years, it's just insane. I'm not interested in that anymore. Tom, nobody cares. Your voters hate you in North Carolina. Just move on. Go out with some level of grace. You didn't want to run for re-election because you knew you couldn't win. Just give it up. He's not going to. And for the Trump administration, I wouldn't placate Thom Tillis. The same comments I made earlier about how you're never going to appease Democrats, I feel the exact same way about Thom Tillis. Don't give in to it. To hell with him. If he wants to be up there and be the moral clarity, as he claims, that the Republicans need to be, then let him have it. I'm sick of dealing with it. I'm sick of trying to convince Republicans to work with Republicans. So that's the latest on everybody's favorite U.S. Senator from North Carolina, Thom Tillis. And it really is a true surprise when you can compare and contrast what somebody like Ted Budd is doing and then compare it to Thom Tillis. Working for the people of North Carolina, trying to push issues forward, working for his constituents. Yet Thom Tillis, of course, up in D.C., frankly, not doing jack shit, but getting in Donald Trump's way. So thanks, Tom. Greatly appreciate it. I look forward to your legacy being remembered as yet another example of you just being completely and utterly out of control in Washington, D.C. Some quick local news to round out the program on this Friday morning. James Osborne. This was a story that we have been covering over the last couple of months. He is an individual here in New Hanover County. He is the roommate and partner of Rick Sutherland, who is a Democrat school board candidate that won in the March the 3rd primary and won one of the 4 seats that were open in that primary. Just days after the day after the election, we learned that Rick Sutherland was living with an individual named James Osborne, who is a convicted sex offender from the state of Virginia, which of course is bad enough when your partner, your roommate, the guy that you're living with, is running for school board, dealing with, of course, underage children. That was bad enough. We then found out after days after that James Osborne was illegally registered to vote. Because he is a convicted felon, because he is still serving out his term, he spent, I think, 5 or 6 years in prison, but because he is still on supervised relief, he's had multiple problems with probation, following the rules as he's supposed to as part of his post-supervision release. We are now learning that he has now been indicted by a grand jury as it relates to illegally voting. He knew he couldn't vote, but he decided that he was going to lie to election officials in both Brunswick and New Hanover County, register to vote anyway, and wow, no surprise, ladies and gentlemen, he was a registered Democrat voting for Democrats. So we've got this document out yesterday from the judicial system here in southeastern North Carolina, the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of North Carolina, a 10-page order talking about how Osborne is now facing a grand jury indictment. It is going to be an interesting case to follow, marring the local Democrat Party. Of course, Rick Sutherland quickly dropped out of the race because that was the smart thing politically for him and the Democrat Party to do. We'll keep an eye on the details right here on the Nick Craig Show. Looks to be a beautiful couple of days weather-wise. If you are out and about over the next 2 days, should be phenomenal temperatures. Friday and Saturday, I should say, close to 90 degrees, 89 today, 89 tomorrow. No chance of any rain Friday or Saturday. As we head into Sunday, especially into Sunday night, we will see the possibility of, or not the possibility, we will see a storm system roll through, which will be good, hopefully, for getting some rain. Temperatures will get back into the 70s for next week before a warm up next week. So beautiful couple of days here weather-wise. Make sure you get out and enjoy it here in southeastern North Carolina. Well, that's going to do it for a Friday edition of the Nick Craig Show. Thanks to the Law Group here at Wilmington for their continued support. Visit them online, lawgroupnc.com, or give them a call, 910-251-6088. The Nick Craig Show streams live weekday mornings, 7 a.m., YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook. It's also available 24/7 in your favorite podcast app and is heard weeknights, 9 to 10 p.m. on WBT Radio in Charlotte. Have a phenomenal weekend. We're back Monday morning right here on the Nick Craig Show.